nothing but the truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will focus on key issues of concern and bring you perspectives and clarity as to why they matter to you and the one clear truth that emerges. It is unprecedented for a head of a nation to be accusing India of being involved in an extrajudicial killing of a foreign citizen in a foreign country, especially if that country belongs to the powerful G7 group of nations, and that too without providing evidence. But that's what Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did on September 18th in his parliament when he told the House of Commons, which is equivalent to the Lok Sabha, and I quote, "Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between the agents of the Government of India, mind you, Government of India, and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar," close quotes. Now, coming soon after India successfully piloted the G20 presidency recently, the allegations had geopolitical implications too, and it had the potential of undoing India's enhanced global stature and reputation. So, obviously, India was angry and described Trudeau's allegations as, and I'm putting in quotes, absurd, and in turn charged Canada with becoming, again in quotes, a safe haven for terrorists, extremists, and organized crime. Harsh language. The exchange sparked off a diplomatic firestorm that threatens to grievously gut relations between these two friendly nations. Both countries, after that, indulged in a tit-for-tat punitive action against each other. Canada took the first step of expelling a senior Indian diplomat posted in Ottawa. India followed it up by expelling a Canadian diplomat based in the country's High Commission in Delhi. Canada announced it was pausing ongoing negotiations for an early progress trade agreement, EPTA, with India. India then retaliated by suspending visa services, including e-visas, in Canada. It also asked Canada to trim the number of diplomats posted in India, said to be around 90, to around 30, which is what India has in Canada and its High Commission over there. Now, these are all serious developments between two supposedly friendly and democratic nations with a long history of bilateral ties. So, in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we will analyze why India and Canada are on the path to confrontation, what is the truth behind Canada's allegations, and what would it take to repair relations between the two major democratic countries, or is that possible at all? So first, let's look at Hardeep Singh Nijjar, whose murder is now the eye of the storm between the two countries. The 45-year-old Nijjar was born in a village near Jalandhar. He migrated to Canada as a 20-year-old, allegedly on a fake passport and a fake name, Ravi Sharma. He was a plumber by trade, and in his asylum papers filed in 1998 before the Canadian authorities, he claims he was arrested in 1995 by the Punjab police and tortured. None of this, of course, was proven, but his claims were repeatedly rejected till in 2001. We don't know what happened, but he acquired Canadian citizenship. After being operating or being below the radar for 8 years, the Punjab police say that Nijjar became an active Khalistan extremist and emerged as the head of the Khalistan Tiger Force, a terrorist outfit which is banned in India. In the past 15 years, Indian intelligence agencies accused Nijjar of aiding several targeted killings in Punjab in using Khalistani militants to smuggle arms into India and run an extortion racket with other Punjab-based gangsters. The Indian government had in fact placed a rupees 10 lakh bounty or 1 million rupees on his head in 2022. They had requested the Canadian government to extradite him, but to no avail. Then on June 18 this year, 2023, two unidentified shooters wearing hoodies waylaid Nijjar, who was driving his pickup truck outside a Gurudwara in Surrey. Now, this is a town on the western coast of Canada. They pumped some 35 rounds into Nijjar and killed him on the spot and fled. Nijjar was among the 24 Canadian-based extremists that Indian intelligence agencies had warned Canada about. But Canada had so far not taken any action against them, because it says it has a liberal freedom of speech law and requires enormous amount of evidentiary proof to take action against any citizen despite whatever other governments say. That's what was the position. But if you look back historically, Canada has had a liberal immigration policy, including granting refuge for asylum seekers, and it has become, in the process, home of a very diverse immigrant population, with Indians heading the list. The Indian diaspora in Canada is now estimated to be about 1.85 million, with Sikhs numbering about half of them, around 800,000. And the estimates, and this is what the police say, that barely 5,000 to 6,000 of these are active supporters of Khalistan. That's probably less than 1% or so are actively involved in Khalistan in Canada. The problem of Khalistan separatists began not just now, but as far back as the 1980s, when the movement gathered momentum in India. In fact, interestingly, relations with Canada had nosedived then when Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, who was the father of Justin Trudeau, turned down requests by his Indian counterpart, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi then, to extradite Khalistani extremist Talvinder Singh Parmar, who had taken shelter in Canada. Now, this is very important because Parmar would later go on to be the mastermind of the 1985 mid-air bombing of Air India's Kanishka aircraft that killed 329 passengers and crew. Now, this was a serious incident, and India's frustrations grew when the Kanishka judicial inquiry dragged on fruitlessly for years, resulting in the acquittal of many of the key accused. There had been a lull for a while, but in the past decade, there's been a resurgence of the Khalistan movement in Canada. Sikh extremists have captured several gurudwaras across Canada, and unfortunately, many have signs on them saying, and I'm putting that in quote, Indian officials and dogs are not allowed. These gurudwaras have allegedly become a major source of funds as well as secret sanctuaries to nurture militants. That's the charge against them. Worse, police say there is a growing nexus between Punjab's gang lords, who indulge in extortion and drug smuggling, and Khalistan extremists, many of whom have used Canada as a base. India believes Pakistan's ISI, or Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, is trying to revive the Khalistan issue after failing to stir trouble in Kashmir. Intelligence officials are keen to nip such attempts in the bud, but with Trudeau at the helm, Canada has so far been insensitive, they say, to India's security interests. And this is one of the major reasons for the deteriorating relations between the two countries, even before this episode happened. A top Indian police official told me, and I'm quoting him, and these are his words, "It's truly frustrating," he says. "All the Canadian officials do is talk, 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 but take no action against any of the extremists. It's a stonewalling approach." He went on to tell me, even when these terrorists claim on social media that they were involved in a killing, we get no cooperation from Canada. And I'm closing quotes here. That's serious charges that the police have been making against the Canadian authorities of being insensitive. In fact, ever since Justin Trudeau took over as Prime Minister of Canada in 2015, when the Liberal Party won the elections with a clear majority, his relations with India have always been rocky over the Khalistan issue. We are told that there is also very little personal chemistry between Trudeau and Prime Minister Modi. On Trudeau's first official visit as Prime Minister to India in 2018, which I covered, it turned out to be somewhat of a diplomatic debacle, especially after news broke that Jaspal Atwal, a former member of the banned International Sikh Youth Federation, or ISYF, and an ex-convict, was invited to an official dinner being hosted by Trudeau in Delhi. That created a major scandal, and Atwal's invitation was withdrawn and Trudeau apologized. Then there were other incidents during that visit. One of them was the then Punjab Chief Minister, Captain Amrinder Singh, also refused to meet Canada's Defence Minister, the then Defence Minister, Harjit Singh Sajjan, terming him a Khalistan sympathizer. And to make matters even worse, Trudeau was apparently miffed that Prime Minister Modi didn't come to the airport to receive him personally, as he had done for other foreign visiting leaders. Then, during the bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Modi, The Indian Prime Minister lectured Trudeau sternly for doing precious little to prevent Canada from becoming a haven for Khalistan terrorists. That truly miffed Trudeau, who was upset at the way the Prime Minister spoke to him. That is what we are told. It is very difficult to confirm these things, but that is the backdrop of what had happened earlier. Now, things began to move forward and get, in fact, more troubling, because after Trudeau's re-election in 2021, the differences with India have only mounted. According to the Indian government's assessment, Trudeau's political position has weakened considerably, and he does have very strong political compulsions to back the Sikh immigrant population just to retain power. Now, to give you a bit of a background on this, politically, Sikh voters are influential in only about 20 to 25 constituencies. Overall, there are about 338 constituencies in Canada, so that is really not much. But given the nature of Canadian coalition politics, these numbers prove decisive in government formation. And just to give you an example, in 2021, in the parliamentary elections, Trudeau's Liberal Party won only 160 seats. And that was 10 short of the majority mark of 170 needed. Remember, I told you it's a 338 strong House of Commons, as it's called. And so he had to take the help of other parties, and the left-leaning New Democratic Party, headed by Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal, who is said to be a Khalistan sympathizer, extended support to the Liberals with its 25 seats of the NDP. This enabled Trudeau to form a government and return as Prime Minister for the third time. Foreign policy experts see four major reasons why Trudeau resorted to making allegations against the Indian government's killing of Niger public as he did. The first is that Trudeau, who is serving his third term as Prime Minister, has become increasingly unpopular, largely for domestic reasons, particularly for his government's shoddy handling of the economy. Latest Canadian opinion polls indicate his personal popularity is at its lowest ever. Also, if general elections were to be held now, the Liberals would be ousted and the Conservatives will win a handsome majority on their own. The second reason is that on the foreign policy front, Trudeau has been on the back foot in his own parliament over the charge that China had exercised influence over the outcome of the 2021 general election, and the Prime Minister had done nothing about it. The third reason is that Trudeau brought the matter to Parliament was that the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's leading daily newspaper, was about to break the story of India's alleged involvement in the Niger killing. So Trudeau was keen to preempt criticism in Parliament that he had dined with Modi at G20 while India was seemingly violating Canada's sovereignty. Bringing charges against India would also divert attention from the accusations of him being complicit or soft on China over its transgressions. It would also divert attention possibly from the country's economic woes, including the high cost of living that Trudeau is being pilloried for. The fourth major reason, and this is the most important reason as to why he acted in the manner that he did, it was to ensure that the NDF would not pull out of his government, given that the party has a large support base of Sikhs. That is the New Democratic Party. The move may have also consolidated Trudeau's Sikh vote bank for 2025. And as an Indian diplomat told me, for Trudeau, the opportunity presented was like killing 4 birds with one stone, and he took it. That's why External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar used the words political convenience to indirectly sum up India's assessment as to why Trudeau made public India's alleged involvement. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, Jaishankar said, and I'm quoting him, "Rule makers do not subjugate rule takers. After all, rules will work only when they equally apply to all, nor must we countenance that political convenience is the word we use, determines responses to terrorism, extremism, and violence." Jaishankar's extraordinarily tough statement at the UN signaled that India will bat on the front foot in the face-off with Canada. It was clear, however, that India was no longer willing to stand by and watch Canada-based Khalistan extremists carry out nefarious anti-India activities, including aiding and abetting terror strikes, while Canada refused to take action against them. India was willing to put its entire bilateral ties on the line and downgrade its relations with Canada. In short, post G20, India had arrived and would not be pushed around. India, though, faced a setback when a New York Times report revealed that after Sikh extremist Nijar was killed, US intelligence officials had shared information with Canada that helped it conclude that India was involved. Quoting unnamed US officials, the report stated that it was their Canadian counterparts who finally unearthed the smoking gun. This included gathering intelligence, including intercepted communication, or signal int as it's called, signal intelligence, of Indian diplomats in Canada, indicating in New Delhi's possible involvement. Now, Canada is part of the Five Eyes alliance, which includes the US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand, countries whose intelligence agencies share information with each other regularly. US officials revealed that President Joe Biden had already taken up the Nijar killing issue with Prime Minister Modi during the bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the G20 in New Delhi. Some experts that I spoke to see a US hand in this development because it was American intelligence agencies that shared information about India's involvement in Canada. The US motive, these experts say, is to bring India down a couple of notches after its G20 assertiveness, and since America is likely to mediate between Canada and India to cool down temperatures, New Delhi would be somewhat obliged to the US for this. Other experts dismiss the assessment and say that the US was not only blindsided, but conflicted by the development that happened. Now the US is forced to balance its interest between a close strategic ally, which is Canada, and a growing strategic partner, which is India. Moreover, Canada has yet to provide any evidence that implicates India, and Trudeau's political opponents will go after him if it does not come soon. On his part, Trudeau feels that India, by hinging its entire relations with Canada solely on the Khalistan issue, is making a mountain out of a molehill, as the population of expat Sikhs is minuscule in his country. So, what is the way out of this diplomatic imbroglio or standoff? Most experts call for the two countries to de-escalate diplomatic tensions because of the high stakes involved in the relationship, especially with the growing economic ties that these two countries have. Trade in goods and services between India and Canada has steadily grown to $8 billion and lies currently in India's favor. But it is well short of the potential. Canadians have begun to invest heavily in India, especially with pension funds accounting for an estimated $55 billion. Now, apart from that, close to 226,000 students were studying in Canada in 2022, and that traffic has grown in recent years. Apart from that, there's a really large amount of immigrant population that is seeking job opportunities in Canada. India's growing importance, and I'm looking at from the Indian point of view, India's growing importance as a bulwark to China and pivot in the Asia Pacific. Both of these areas, mind you, align well with Canada's forward-leaning policy. So it is in Canada's interest to nurture its relationship with New Delhi and not have confrontation with it. So there's one option that Prime Minister Trudeau can do, is that having demonstrated to Sikhs that he stood up for them, he can assuage India by cracking down on major Khalistani extremists operating in the country without facing flack from his domestic constituents. Rather than suspend visa issuance to all Canadians, as India has done, India, on its part, should focus on cancelling visas and passports of PIO card holders who are conducting proven extremist activities, in addition, as they've done in the past, to confiscating their physical and monetary assets in India for being absconders from justice. As a former Indian High Commissioner in Canada told me, and I'm just quoting him, and this is his thoughts about the way out, both sides need to get on the ramp and off the highway so that quiet negotiations are possible rather than speeding headlong into conflict. That's good advice. It's a difficult situation, but as we know, diplomacy is the art of making the impossible possible. For more details, do read my article in the latest issue of India Today, which goes in depth into India-Canada relations. Thank you for listening to this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing but the truth.